In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, a bustling town in the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of history's strangest events. It began in July, in the sweltering heat, when a woman stepped into a narrow street and began to move. Her name was recorded as Frau Troffea. At first, no one took her seriously. Neighbors assumed she was mocking them or had lost her senses. But as she continued to spin and stomp for hours without rest, her behavior shifted from comical to unsettling. What began with one woman soon spread to dozens, and within weeks, to hundreds. Men, women, and children moved as if under a spell, dancing until their bodies collapsed. This outbreak would later be called the Dancing Plague of 1518. And though centuries have passed, its cause remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of history. Frau Troffea's ordeal lasted nearly a week. Witnesses claimed her feet bled, her clothes soaked with sweat. But she could not stop. Soon, others joined her. Some accounts say 30 within days, then 50, then hundreds. By late July, the city square was crowded with staggering bodies, all jerking, twisting, and convulsing as if controlled by invisible strings. They were not joyful. Their faces were twisted in pain. They cried out for help. Some begged for relief, but their bodies refused to obey. By August, as many as 400 citizens were said to be dancing. Imagine narrow medieval streets filled with the sound of shoes slamming against stone, of groans and sobs, of families pleading with their loved ones to sit down. But they could not. Some dancers collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise again moments later. Others broke bones. Some suffered strokes or heart attacks. Chroniclers claim that several danced themselves to death. The city council, desperate for solutions, first believed the only way to purge the affliction was to let the dancers move until the madness burned out. They cleared public spaces and even erected temporary stages. Musicians were hired, drums and fiddles provided rhythm, and professional dancers were brought in to guide the afflicted. Instead of easing the chaos, it intensified it. To onlookers, it seemed as if the music drove the victims into greater frenzy, their movements becoming sharper, more violent, more destructive. Why Strasbourg? Why 1518? To answer that, we must understand the city and its people. Strasbourg was prosperous, but 1518 was a year of suffering. Famine had swept the region. The winter harvest had failed, grain prices soared, and hunger stalked the poor. Disease was common. Political tensions simmered between guilds, nobles, and church officials. Life expectancy was short. Fear was constant, and religion dominated every explanation of suffering. So when hundreds of people erupted into uncontrollable motion, the most obvious explanation for locals was spiritual punishment. The name on everyone's lips was Saint Vitus, a Christian martyr long associated with epilepsy, seizures, and frenzied movements. To many, the dancing plague was a curse sent by him. Authorities eventually ordered the afflicted to be taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus in Saverne, about 30 miles away. There, priests placed holy relics on their chests, anointed their feet, and prayed for mercy. Some reports claimed that the rituals helped. Others said the victims returned home only to relapse into frantic motion. The most unsettling detail is how seriously the authorities treated it. This was not seen as a passing madness, but a crisis that consumed the city. Ordinances were written, funds were spent, and punishments were decreed. Music and dancing were banned. Weddings were ordered to proceed without musicians. The fear that the mania could spread further drove the council to shut down gatherings. Yet despite every effort, the plague only ended when it chose to. By late September, the dancers slowed, collapsed, and finally the nightmare faded. But the questions never did. Modern scholars have spent centuries trying to explain what happened. Some argue that contaminated rye bread was to blame. A fungus called ergot grows in damp conditions and produces chemicals similar to LSD. Victims of ergotism experience hallucinations, spasms, and convulsions. Could a town already weakened by hunger have consumed tainted grain, triggering the outbreak? Perhaps. But ergot also causes gangrene, limbs turning black and rotting away. Chroniclers make no mention of such symptoms. Others point to mass psychogenic illness, what we might call mass hysteria. Under intense social stress, groups can experience shared psychological symptoms. Strasbourg's citizens, plagued by famine, disease, and religious fear, may have manifested their suffering in uncontrollable dance. This theory is compelling, especially since similar outbreaks had occurred before. Indeed, Strasbourg's plague was not unique. Europe had experienced dancing manias for centuries. In 1237, children in Erfurt reportedly marched in a dancing procession for miles before collapsing. In the 14th century, groups of people in Aachen and Cologne danced wildly in the streets, often linked to fear of plague. These outbreaks, too, were attributed to Saint Vitus, giving rise to the term Saint Vitus's dance. None, however, matched the scale of 1518. Still, the Strasbourg event fits a pattern of communities cracking under pressure. When hunger, fear, and religious dread combined, the human body became an unwilling canvas for hysteria. People convulsed, screamed, or danced, and entire cities became swept up in the storm. Other theories are more sensational. Some suggest secret cults staged ritual dances that spiraled out of control. Others claim demonic possession. A few writers even link it to extraterrestrial influence, though such ideas belong more to modern conspiracy than medieval reality. What makes the event so chilling is the first-hand testimony. Chroniclers wrote of men collapsing with foam on their lips, of women shrieking as their feet bled, of children caught up in the frenzy. Families tied victims to beds only to see them break free and resume dancing. One account described a man who laughed as he moved. Even as tears streamed down his face, his body torn between pleasure and pain. The dancing plague ended as mysteriously as it began. By the end of summer, the movement ceased. The afflicted returned to their lives, though many were crippled or permanently weakened. No cure was found. No single explanation satisfied. The council closed the records. Strasbourg moved on, but the legend lingered. For centuries, the tale of the 1518 outbreak was whispered as a warning. Preachers used it as proof of divine punishment. Physicians studied it as an early case of psychological contagion. Today, historians debate its meaning, but all agree on one point. It was real. Hundreds of people truly danced without rest, some until death. What does it tell us? That human beings are fragile, not just in body but in mind. That fear, faith, and suffering can combine to create outcomes stranger than fiction. The dancing plague was not a carnival, not a joke. It was a nightmare played out in the open, in cobbled streets filled with wailing, exhausted citizens. To this day, the cause remains unknown. Was it poisoned bread, mass hysteria, or something far darker? Something beyond explanation. The dancing plague of 1518 stands as one of history's most unsettling mysteries. It reminds us that civilization is never as stable as it seems. In Strasbourg, in the heat of summer, hundreds of lives were seized by a force no one could explain, and no one could stop. And this is why stories like these endure. They force us to confront the limits of our understanding. They show us how quickly order can collapse into chaos, and they leave us with a lingering question. If it could happen then, could it happen again? If you want more journeys into the world's strangest mysteries, events that history records but cannot explain, comment, like and subscribe. Join me as we explore more tales of the eerie, the forgotten, and the unexplained.